Ever since it first came out back in 2022, Smiling Friends has always been on my radar as something I wanted to watch. From the short clips I'd seen on YouTube, I knew that it was just my kind of humor. The only problem was that I had nowhere to watch it. Although it does air on Channel 4 in the UK, I would have to go and watch it on my downstairs TV. And that would probably cause my little sister to throw a hissy fit, because she couldn't watch Peppa Pig or whatever slop they air on children's television these days. So, I had to resort to some more frowned upon tactics to find full episodes of the show. After doing a bit of digging, I did manage to find a website that did the job. I can't quite remember the exact name of the site, but I remember its layout vividly. It was a simple list of episodes in front of a white background, with a couple of ads here and there. Each episode had an image assigned to it that I think was supposed to show a still frame from the episode. However, only a few of them were like this, and a lot of them were just random pieces of promotional artwork or stolen fan art, with the contrast turned up. They all also had descriptions of the episodes that were either blatantly ripped from other sources or written by ChatGPT. Some episodes had watermarks on them from other piracy websites, and some looked as though they had been screen recorded from an Adult Swim livestream. Either way, I watched them all regardless of the poor quality, and needless to say, I enjoyed myself quite a bit. But as I was exiting the website, I noticed something odd that wasn't there when I first opened it. It was titled, Smiling Friends Season 3 Episode 1, Late Night Call. And the image accompanying it was a scene from the Season 1 episode, The Smiling Friends Go to Brazil. Just with the saturation turned down a bit. I immediately just brushed this off as them putting the episode on there twice, and then just slapping the name of Season 3 Episode 1 on it to catch people's attention. But before I left the website, I decided to just give it a quick look through out of curiosity. Who knows? Maybe they could have mistaken some YouTube parody for a real episode and included it. I clicked the episode, and suddenly all the other episodes and even the ads disappeared. The only thing left was the episode. After buffering for a while, it began playing, and I was greeted by the familiar chaotic theme song. It begins with a view of the Smiling Friends building at night, before cutting to the break room, where we see Charlie and Pim getting ready to go home. "Wow, Charlie. Today's show was a long day," Pim said it in his usual cheery voice.
"You said it, Pim. I can barely keep my damn eyes open,"
Charlie said in his nasally monotone voice before letting out a yawn and rubbing his eyes.
"I think I'm gonna head home. See you later, Pim."
Charlie gets out of the chair he's sitting in and begins to walk towards the door, but is interrupted by the sound of the siren going off. I jumped backward in surprise at the sudden noise, and my curiosity began to grow, as I had never seen or heard about this episode before. Charlie's face turned into a look of annoyance, and even Pim looked a bit upset. "Oh gosh, what could the boss want now?"
"I have no idea, Pim, but this is bullshit. I just want to get out of here."
The two look at each other with defeated expressions, before the scene cuts to them in the boss's office. The boss is wearing an old-fashioned nightgown, with a hat and candle, and even he looks tired. Hey boys. Sorry to bother you two so late, but we got a client who needs some cheering up, and according to our policy, he technically called before we closed, so we've got to help him out." The boss points to a plaque on the wall of his office that reads, "Summer or winter, day or night, the Smiling Friends shall bring delight." The two look over at the plaque and nod.
Look, dude, can you get Alan or Glep to deal with this one? We've been out doing jobs all day.
Charlie says he is pleading with the boss to let him go home. Oh, yeah, about that. They just didn't show up today. They haven't been answering my calls either. I've got no idea what's going on with them. You guys are the only ones who can take this, the boss replies, stopping mid-sentence to yawn. The two stay quiet, a look of misery painted on their faces. They stay silent for a couple of seconds, before Pim breaks the silence by letting out a disappointed sigh and hanging his head low to the ground.
I'll get the car keys,
he says, before the scene cuts to show them driving through a rural area in the Smiling Friends Company car.
Okay, let's get this done as quick as we can. No fucking around,
Charlie says, squinting his eyes to try and see the road better. Yeah, that's probably for the best. The fog is getting pretty bad around here, replied Pim, trying his hardest not to fall asleep. At this point, I was seriously confused about what I was watching. It definitely looked like a Smiling Friends episode, and the voices all sounded like they should. But at the same time, something was off. It felt way more grounded in reality and serious compared to other episodes, and I just couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Once Charlie and Pim had arrived, the scene cuts to show their destination. An old dilapidated RV, surrounded by vast trees and shrubbery. Are you sure this is the right place, Charlie? Pim says, looking slightly anxious.
Well, this is where the boss said to go. Well, we'll just knock on the door real quick, and if nobody's here, we'll just head home, I guess,
Charlie replies, still annoyed from having to work late. As the two walk to the door, the camera pans down to show that the ground is littered with trash, like beer cans and cigarette butts. Once they reach the door, Charlie gently knocks and the two wait for a response. After waiting for about a minute, Charlie groans and begins to walk back to the car.
God damn it, I knew it was gonna be a prank call or something. What a waste of time,
Charlie says. He places a hand on the door handle, but instead of opening it, he stops and realizes something. He bends down and looks at one of the front tires, and to his horror, it and all of the tires on the car had been slashed. He backs away from the car, breathing heavily and swearing under his breath.
Shit! Pim, come over here and take a look at this!
No response came from Pim, and once Charlie realized this, he turned around to face where Pim had been standing. Pim was gone. The camera cut to show Charlie looking around frantically, trying to find Pim. He was sweating profusely and shaking in fear. As Charlie stood next to the car door, desperately calling out Pim's name, a hooded figure walked up behind him and stabbed him in the neck with a syringe. He yelled out in pain, before letting out a long groan and falling unconscious onto the ground. The feeling of something being wrong only intensified as the episode went on. Although I did consider just closing the site then and there, I was in too deep, and I wanted to see how the rest of the episode would play out. So I continued watching despite my mild unease. The screen faded to black, and after a couple of seconds of darkness, I heard a voice. Charlie? Are you awake? Pim said, trying to keep his voice down.
Where the hell are we?
Charlie yelled, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. Shh! Keep your voice down, or they'll hear us, Pim said through gritted teeth. Before Charlie could respond, a dim light turned on, and the situation that the two were in was revealed. Pym was tied to a chair and Charlie was shackled to the wall. In front of them in the corner were the bodies of Alan and Glep. Alan had been decapitated and had multiple bullet wounds to the chest, and Glep looked as though he had been stomped on, and all that was left of him was a small green puddle and his purple wizard hat. Charlie and Pym scream in fear at the sight of their friends' dead bodies, and they begin desperately trying to break free from their restraints. As they struggle to break free, the sound of laughter can be heard coming from behind the door of the room. As the laughter gets louder and louder, the two's screaming dies down as they hear somebody approaching. The two go completely silent and brace themselves as the door creaks open and the figure on the other side begins to creep into the room. Reveals himself to be none other than the Brazilian man from the airport in the episode The Smiling Friends Go to Brazil. Charlie and Pym look shocked, and they remain silent for a few more seconds, before finally, Charlie builds up the courage to speak.
Why the hell would you do this?
The Brazilian man lets out a small chuckle.
I needed some cash from you and your friends, and you refused to even give me a simple yes or no answer. So now I'm going to give you what you deserve, you selfish filos de puta.
And with that, the Brazilian man pulls a pocket knife from behind his back and begins making his way towards Charlie and Pym. They tried to beg and plead for their lives, but it's no use.
Dude, please, you can have some cash, man, I promise, just...
Before Charlie can even finish, the man covers his mouth with his hand and plunges the knife into his upper leg. It then pans over to Pym, who is watching in horror, as his best friend gets butchered by an insane Brazilian man. Charlie's muffled screams can be heard, as the man continues to mutilate him off screen. Pym tries to beg the man to stop, but it's no use. After about 30 seconds of agonizing screams, Charlie goes silent, and the camera pans to show his dead body. His throat is slit, and his body is covered in stab wounds and cuts. The pocket knife used to end his life is lodged in his eye. Pym stares traumatized at his dead friend, as the Brazilian man pulls the knife out of Charlie's eye and places it back in his pocket. He leaves the room momentarily and comes back with a hammer in his hand. We then cut to Pym's point of view, as the Brazilian man inches closer and closer. Once he is right in front of Pym, he begins to breathe heavily before muttering,
Your turn now.
and swinging the hammer at Pym. Before the hammer could hit him, the screen cut to black, and I was kicked out of the site immediately. I just sat in my chair dumbfounded for a few minutes before grabbing my phone and searching for more information on the episode. But unsurprisingly, I found nothing. I tried going back to the website to see what I could find, but no matter where I search, I just can't find it again. And that was Late Night Call, written by Mr. Larry. Review time. I'm gonna be honest, this is not that great. I wasn't too crazy about it. There are some good things, but at the same time, there are various concepts that I did not think worked within the story. For the good stuff, I liked how it was presented as a possible fan episode that was mistaken for a real one, put onto a bootleg website, a bootleg streaming website, consisting of episodes that were, as described, streamed off of actual airings, and the screen caps given for the thumbnails were saturated or contrasted and low quality. It genuinely feels like an actual bootleg website, somewhat like Kiss Cartoon or Watch anime online, watch cartoons online, whatever it's called. And as for the episode in general, the pacing was just right. The beginning, the build up was great. The characters acted like how they were supposed to. It genuinely felt like a Smiling Friends episode. I liked it. But then it got bad. For the negatives, for one, this entire story is written in the form of a wall of text. I just really wish it was spaced out into paragraphs, because while it was coherent and I could understand what was going on, it was hard to read and hard to keep track for that reason. So, I heavily advise spacing out the story into paragraphs. There were also some punctuation errors or lack of punctuation, which I feel like could be fixed, but that is very important when you're writing a story. And then we get to the actual plot. I felt like Pym suddenly disappearing and the tires getting slashed so they couldn't go away. I felt like, wow, pretty interesting climax. Pretty interesting lead to the reveal. And then it turned into a torture scene. Yeah, torture scenes have been so overdone in Lost Episode pastas. They're just not interesting anymore. Not only that, but it's made clear that out of all the people that could possibly torture Pym and Charlie, out of all the people that have a grudge against against them, it's the Brazilian man from that one episode where they go to Brazil? The guy that showed up for a 30-second gag and then disappeared? Why him? Why the very obvious gag character? I don't understand. And the motivation for him killing them was kind of silly. Like, I know that Smiling Friends is a silly show overall, and it does have its serious moments, and it's portrayed as silly, such as the first episode, the pilot. But, come on, in context of a torture scene, it's not really that good of a motivation. And also, what about Alan and Glep? Like, how did they get killed by this guy if they weren't called in? Like, Pym and Charlie were called in, sure, but why Alan and Glep? Why would this guy kill them and then call in? Like, instead of waiting for Charlie and Pym to come out themselves. I don't really understand. For the reasons I gave, I'm going to give this story a 5 out of 10. It's not awful, but it's not good either. It could be better. Keep writing, keep improving, Mr. Larry. Thank you for sending me this story. With that being said, this is simply my personal opinion. We all have our opinions regarding these pastas. What did you think of the pasta? What would you have done to improve upon it? And as always, I will see you all in the next narration. I love you all. Bless.